In this video, I'm going to be going over installing Streamlit on your computer, the difference between what we've been using where prior to this, where we used Google Colab, and now we're using Visual Studio Code. And then also the different ways that we're going to be activating, dependent on your system, the Streamlit virtual environment. And then we're going to be looking into actually completing your first Streamlit application. Now, as I mentioned in class a plethora of times for those of you who show up, these videos are a lot longer because I go in a lot more depth. We only have about 45 to 50 minutes in class. So those are shorter times where we get directly into it. But in this video, I take a little bit longer because you can always fast forward or speed watch this or look at the different timestamps inside of Visual Studio or YouTube. Now, first things first, what we're going to do is I want you to click on the installing Streamlit instructions. When you do so, it should open up a file that will show you, dependent on your system, which way that you should be installing any of this application. Since we've already installed Visual Studio Code on your computer in the last assignment, last week, or earlier in the semester, what we're now going to do is start with step 6, where we're actually going to create a virtual environment. But before we do that, I'm going to show you how to create your 120 portfolio. It seems like a lot of people are struggling with that a little bit. And then I'm going to also show you how you're going to activate it and deactivate it within your Visual Studio Code. But before we get into that, the first thing we're going to look at is understanding the difference between Visual Studio Code and Google Colab. So I'm going to pause the video and open up Visual Studio Code and then start my explanation there. All right, so if you remember at the beginning of the semester, we actually were working with Google Colab. And while we were working with Google Colab, you were able to run your Python code cell by cell. You didn't have to worry about, importing this and running things in the terminal. And that's because Google Colab is a cloud-based IDE. It is provided by Google, and it runs Python code in the browser. So you didn't even have to download anything onto your computer. There was no installation required. It was just easy accessible to you. This Google Colab is actually primarily used for data science, AI, and machine learning notebooks. You were able to run your code in cell-by-cell format, and it was a lot more smoother and easier to use at the very beginning while you're learning. It's good for quick testing, for experimenting, and also data analysis. But now that you guys have had a little bit more Python experience, you understand what is expected of you, we now are going to actually be focusing in on Visual Studio Code, which is a code editor. But it is formerly a code editor, but once we start adding in our plugins and installations like Python and adding in different libraries like using Streamlit, we're now actually using it as an integrated development environment, which is what that IDE means when I said we're going to use Visual Studio Code with that in the IDE. And what that integrated development environment means that we're developing our code in this environment. And this is a tool where programmers can write code, test code, run code. It also allows us to have features like showing us syntax errors, highlighting errors, debugging our code, and also file organization where we can actually have our code within folders and organizing it in a structured way. Inside of Visual Studio Code, there's also an integrated terminal, which we're going to be using a lot in the rest of the semester. Now, Visual Studio Code was developed by Microsoft. It runs directly on your computer, as you have currently seen. You had to do a lot of installation. When we actually started using it, you installed Python, which is one of the programming languages, the multiple programming languages that Visual Studio Code hosts and allows us to use. It also has that built-in terminal for running commands like streamlit run app.py, which we'll actually get into here in this video. And then it actually is very ideal for us building complete applications and including web apps, APIs, and local projects. And in this case, for this class, since it is an Introduction to Programming Fundamentals class, we are just going to be using it for simple application web apps that we're using through Streamlit library. So the key difference reference, Visual Studio Code runs locally on your computer and is best for actually building full applications like Streamlit apps. Google Colab actually runs in the browser and is best for experiments, quick testing, and data analysis. So I hope now that you have a good understanding of the switch that we're doing and the fact that you've used two different systems so far, two different IDEs, quote unquote, so far. Now we're going to get into Streamlit. What is Streamlit and why do we even use it? So Streamlit is a very, very strong, powerful open source Python library. It actually allows for us to actually turn Python scripts, which is the kind of code that we've been using, into more interactive web apps, and it looks a lot better without actually needing to have any web development experience. And when I mean web development experience, it just means replacing the complex HTML, CSS, JavaScript web frameworks for simple applications. So it's very easy for us to use dashboards, forms, widgets using only Python. And it's very great for data visualization and machine learning results. As you will see whenever we run the Streamlit Hello, you'll see some of that data visualization and frameworks that is being used that are interactive and also shareable, where you can actually deploy your app online and other people can see it from wherever they are. So you'll notice that as we get into it. But before we can actually start using Streamlit, we have to do a little bit of work here in Visual Studio Code. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to set up your CS120 portfolio. And then I'm going to also show you how to create a virtual environment that will host our Streamlit information. And then we will get right into creating your first Streamlit app. So first things first, what you're going to do is click on, when you open up Visual Studio Code, this is what you should see unless you were in class and you already created your CS120 portfolio and we've already gone through setting up everything you need to set up. So what we're going to do first is go to Open Folder. And now we're in this folder section. I'm going to click on Desktop. And the first thing I'm going to do is create a new folder. And here, what I'm going to actually do is call this CS120 portfolio, and I'm going to label it video for video purposes, but you're going to stop at portfolio. Then I'm going to click on select folder, and now it's opened up here in Visual Studio Code. So we're going to click X here, and we're going to just click X to, the welcome section here, and I'm going to just push this over. Now we're in Visual Studio Code, and you'll see here that we're in our portfolio. And what I'm going to have you do is actually click on these three dots up here, and you'll notice it in your Visual Studio Code IDE. And I know that there is a difference in terms of how it looks depending on your system, if you're using Mac, Linux, or Windows. But in this case here, we're just going to click on these three dots and click on Terminal and New Terminal. And this is the built-in terminal that I was discussing earlier that is available within Visual Studio Code here. So what we're actually going to be doing in this terminal is a little bit of commands and also activation of a virtual environment. But as we move into this terminal section here, I'm going to zoom in a little bit and close this out. You'll see that it's actually located where I created that folder on my computer. So in this section here, we're actually seeing where we have our location of our folders. So I have it on my desktop and I called it CS120 portfolio. This is great. This is the path of where my files will be. So anytime you open up Visual Studio, it needs to be in this portfolio. It shouldn't be in a module. It shouldn't be in a separate thing. It needs to be in your CS120 portfolio. Now, the next thing I'm going to show you is to create a file. In this case, I'm just going to call this Lab07 for this current assignment. If you are in another assignment section and it says in there a different assignment, you're going to change it to whatever the name is on Canvas. In this case, it's just going to be Lab07 for this current time that we're in. Now, we have a lab07 here, and you'll notice that inside of this file, and I do lab07.py, it's created a Python file for me. You need to make sure that you include that .py at the end there. Now, the next thing we're actually going to do, because I like to have my portfolio is sectioned off based off of the module, so I can actually go back and see what I'm doing, where I was doing it, and what section I was doing it in. I'm going to create a folder and section them in that way. You are free to do this portfolio in the way that is best for you to understand and organize your own code. If you prefer to have all of your files in just this portfolio and that's it, that is fine to do. If you prefer to section them off in the way that I'm doing, then you can follow this along. You're not required to do this. So in this section here, I'm just going to do module 10. And you'll notice that I named my folder one word. You can do module 10 one word, or you can even, and I'm going to zoom out a little bit, or you can even, and I'm going to rename it. Let me open this up a bit. Or you can even rename it and have it have an underscore. But what you don't want to have is that space in between there. We want it to be named properly this way that when we run the path, it doesn't give us any issues. So now I have module 10. I'm going to just move my file inside of there. Click on move, and now it's directly in that file path. However, I'm going to create a test file to show you the next step, or to show you exactly what I'm going to do in the next step. So I'm going to do test.py. You do not need to do this. This is just for the purposes of the video. Okay. Now, in the next section here, this is going to be important to pay attention to. I'm going to show you how you can actually check where your file is and how you would actually work on creating your virtual environment. So in the first step here, we're just going to create your virtual environment. We're going to come back to this test file here in a little bit, but first, let's create your virtual environment. Now for Windows, how we go about doing that, it's dependent on your system. So you may have to type in Python-m venv, and this is naming your virtual environment. And in this case, when we create a virtual environment, what it actually does is, let's say, yeah, you're in this class and I have you install Python 3.11, and it's not 3.9 in this class. Actually, it was 3.12 that we had you install here. So Python 3.12, and let's say in another class you have to install Python 3.9. And like I have here, different virtual environments, because I've gone through this a few different times. It allows for us to choose the version of Python that we want to use, because every version has maybe a little bit different. There are different dependencies on it. And depending on what you're using, the plugins you want to use, the dependencies you're using, it is going to be important. Do you have a specific version dependent on the systems that you're using? So in this case here, we are using 3.12. So I want to create a virtual environment with this specific package for this specific course with the information that I need for this class to run everything. So in this case, when we create our Python, which we're using 3.12 right now as it is in fall 2025, we also want to import Streamlit. And so we want all of this to be in one place so that we can use all the tools in one place and it doesn't corrupt something else. So if you moved up into another course and they have you using a different version of Streamlit or a different dependency that is associated to maybe Python 3.8 or maybe Python 3.7, you now have a virtual environment that will hold 3.12, and you can choose another environment to create that won't corrupt the information in this virtual environment. So that is the purpose and the point of virtual environment. So now here for some of you, you're going to write out Python -m venv. For me, Python doesn't work, so I have to use Py. For Macs, you're going to do Python 3-m venv. and that will work. You'll click enter and run that. And for those of you who are following the instructions online, I will just show you here. Again, Python is to the right, or Mac is to the right, and Windows is in the middle. You can click on the drop down for Mac, start at section 6 here, and this is where you will go because the activation is different for Macs and Python. So you want to read the instructions and ask any questions that you need to ask while you are installing this. Okay, so now what I'm going to do here is do my own, and it's just going to be pi -m then v then v. So now I should have this little drop box that opens up here, and it says, we noticed a new environment has been created. Do you want to select it for the workspace folder? I'm going to say yes. If, for example, this does not show up here, or it moves and you didn't get time to click on it, you're going to click on that little bell, and then this is where those notifications will show up for you. So if you miss it, just click on the bell and you'll find it there. And then you'll notice, as I created this virtual environment, two separate things happen. Down here, we see that 3.12 now has venv wrapped around it. And then we also see a folder was created in our Explorer section here, right underneath module inside of our CS120 portfolio. Now, this indicated that you created your virtual environment correctly, and this is a good thing. So now in the next step here, what we're going to do is activate it. All right. So now in this section here, what I do want to point out before we move on, and I'm going to get rid of these little annotations here, is you will not, and please do not, move your virtual environment folder anywhere else. Where it's created is perfectly fine. Do not move it into a module. Do not move it anywhere else. It's in your CS120 portfolio because this is what we're going to be opening in Visual Studio to use. Once it's created, you must leave it there. There's only one virtual environment that should be inside of your 120 portfolio. So do not create another one. We're going to be activating this multiple times throughout the semester. Now, the next thing we're going to do first, now that we've created our virtual environment, is we're going to activate it. Again, there are instructions for different systems, so please look at the correct instructions for your system. All right, so now what we're going to do is activate it. And to activate this virtual environment in our Windows computer here, what I'm going to do right, is actually type in VNV, which is the name of your virtual environment, whatever you named it here. And as you've seen when I showed earlier, I've named my virtual environments different things depending on what I'm using. But this time we did create it as venv. So we're using venv here. And you'll notice now there's a difference between Python 3.12 and whenever we activate Python with the venv here. So now we're going to just do venv / scripts for Windows. You're going to capitalize the S. And then in this section here, we're just going to type in activate. Now, when you click enter, you'll know something cool that happens over here. So I'm going to click on enter real quick. And here we have virtual environment is activated. How you deactivate your virtual environment is to click or to type in deactivate, and you'll have to spell it right. And then it's no longer activated, so that venv gets moved. All right, so now what we're going to do is just activate it again for the sake of making sure that we're in it before we install it. So again, every time we're going to activate it, it's going to be the same command, venv scripts activate. So if, for example, you don't remember this, or you're not someone that will remember this, just create at the side here, command to run dot txt, and then here you'll just put a simple message here to activate virtual environment, in a terminal. We're just going to have here VNV /scripts /activate. And this is for Windows. And then again, for Macs, it's going to be source, then v /bin /activate. And then for Linux, it's going to be the same. We have source, and for you, it might be .venv /bin /activate. But for Linux, please make sure you reach out to me because I will guide you through that process. But these are all the activation terminals. You have to activate it first before you can use it. Now, the next thing we're going to actually do after we activate our virtual environment, and you see a little green note, so I'll put note, see if VNV shows up to the left of path. If you don't see this, it was not activated, okay? So now that we have activated this, the next step for us to do is install Streamlit. Once you've installed it this one time, you do not need to install it again, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to say pip install Streamlit. But before we do, what I'm going to do is go into Lab 7. And at the very top of this, access real quick, I'm going to type in import Streamlit as ST. And you'll notice that Streamlit portion is highlighted, and when you hover it, it says import Streamlit cannot be resolved. That means that it's not installed yet. But once we install it, it will get installed into our virtual environment library section. Right now, all we see is pip. And we will see this run properly. And I'm going to keep this section open so you can see as we install Streamlit, all of the libraries associated that is needed for Streamlit to work on in our portfolio inside of our virtual environment will get installed here. I'm going to click on enter. And then this is all the data that gets, or all the libraries that get installed into your virtual environment on your device here. So this is really important because a lot of these items here you may use in the future, and you may have to have a certain version of it or a certain dependency associated to that. So it's important, which is why I had you guys create a virtual environment here. And you'll even notice as it's installing, it's underlining, getting rid of it because like, oh, we have it. Oh, no, we don't. So because it's using a lot of the libraries in the background and we're updating it. So now what I'm going to do is just pause the video until this is done installing, and then I'll come back once it's done and we can move on to the next step. All right, so it is now finished installing, but you'll notice here for some of you, you may have to update your Python extension with the pip install, and this is how we actually were able to install Streamlit. We use pip install Streamlit. So you want to go ahead and copy that path just from the Python extension, what is highlighted, because the current version of pip I'm using is 23.2. It wants me to use 25.3 if I want to. You're not required to, but it's a good thing to keep your system updated. So I'm going to update that. And now it's successfully updated and we're good now. So now let's go ahead. I'm going to close the virtual environment and I'm going to go ahead and erase this real quick. And you'll notice it turned blue. Oops. Streamlit SST. Now we have Streamlit working in our device and everything works perfectly fine now. Well, at least we think it works perfectly fine. So how we go about testing if it does, inside of the instructions, I had you do Streamlit hello, and this is their way of getting you to go into their own page, and you'll see it pop up automatically in this on your browser here. And you'll notice the port that it's using is 8501, and it's on your local network on your computer. And in this case here, this shows you can check out their website if you want, and you can see the different you can see the different applications you can make. You can look at their documentation for the Streamlit app if you want. But I'm going to go right back to the Streamlit Hello to show you the data visualization that I told you about. You can see this, how they plot the data. They have plotting demo to show you what that looks like here, and the interaction here of completing it. They have where you can actually see this demo here showing how we're using SD Paydeck chart to display geospatial data, which is really cool. We can, move through the earth and see that data. It's a really nice interactive application here. There's animation showing you, in this case, to build cool animation using the Juliet set and fractal-based stuff. And then we can also modify it here using the we're actually going to be using this, and I forgot it already. Um, Tool, yeah, oh goodness, the brain. Slider, that's what it's called. Using the slider here, where you can actually see the visualization of it and the separation of things if you're so inclined. So now that we kind of know that Streamlit works on our device and we've installed it correctly, I'm going to just close out of these, but you can actually follow through with this and play around with it if you'd like. The next thing I'm actually going to do is go back to Visual Studio Code so we can start off where we want to. So now what I'm going to do here is we're going to do Control C to stop that running. And we're going to start with our first application here. So first things first, and I'm going to minimize the terminal for now. Well, actually, no, because we need to actually go into this. So I'll show you. So we're using Lab 07, and like I mentioned earlier, if you are wanting to section off your code this way, that is perfectly fine, where you have it in a folder. But you'll see here, and this was the example that I wanted to show, was as I've created a test file here, if I want to actually get access into my Lab 7, what you'll notice is at the path here, if I type in ls, this is just going to be a list of everything that is inside of currently the CS120 portfolio video, or in your case, your CS120 portfolio. So when you type in ls, it shows you the last time you wrote in it. It shows you here the name of the file. You have your venv folder here, your command to run txt, and then the test file here that has nothing inside of it. But we don't see Lab 7 at all. And that's because Lab 7 is inside of Module 10. So in order for us to access Lab 7, we actually have to change the directory and go inside of this folder. And how we go about doing that is if you, for example, don't remember the file name or the folder name, or you don't want to make a mistake, you could just copy that. And here we're going to do CD, and we're going to just have a space and paste that in. And now you'll notice it no longer says CS120 portfolio down here, but it says CS120 portfolio /module 10. So now if I type in ls, I now see my lab 7, and that's the only file available inside of this module because that's the only file I created. So now you know you're in the right place. Now we can start actually coding in Streamlit, and then when we run our Streamlit command, because we're inside of the folder where the file is, it'll work perfectly fine for us. So I'm going to go ahead and close out the Explorer now that I've made my point in terms of the path file. If you struggle with this, please feel free to let me know, and I will be happy to go through it with you in whatever way you learn best. All right. Now I'm going to minimize the terminal now that we're directed in the right path because I'm using my folder system. Okay. Now, the next step that we're going to actually do is just a simple application to test to see if everything is working well. If you did this in class, because we were mostly focusing on installing Streamlit and we didn't have that much time to go through everything, I just had you upload just a simple hello. We did the title and the caption. But if you weren't in class, you want to follow through with the instructions. I just wanted to have something there for you to actually work on. What we're going to do after we imported Streamlit is we're going to this gives us access to all of the Streamlit functions. And we're actually using the shorthand ST. So we don't have to keep on doing a Streamlit dot to get access to it. We only need to do ST because it could get tedious after a while having to type in Streamlit this, Streamlit that. So this allows us just to access the functions in a more shorthand or shorter name way. So the first thing in the instructions it asks you to do is define a main function. And you know how to do that because you've been defining functions for a few weeks now. So we're going to do def main. It's not taking any parameters yet. But now we've defined the function. This is going to be the container for all of the code where we're going to make our app a little bit more organized. And as we go through the semester, we're actually going to have everything be in a more hierarchical, decomposed way where things are sectioned off. And you're going to make sure that each function does one functionality here. We're breaking a bigger problem that we have into smaller components. Now, before we move on, I'm going to make sure, though, that you have a section. So we're going to just make sure we use our pass here. Hopefully, you guys remember what pass is. It just allows us to create a placeholder function until we're ready to create more code here. So now we have our defining our main function here. Everything looks good. We now need to go ahead and make sure we have the line of code that allows for us to run it. So in this case here, we're going to use our if name main. So we're going to have if underscore underscore, which is 2 underscores name, underscore underscore, equal equal, which is equivalent. If that hidden attribute name is equivalent to 2 underscores main, 2 more underscores, and then our colon here. This is Python's way of saying we only want to run this part if the file is opened directly, not imported from somewhere else. And if you don't know necessarily what I'm saying, I did do an earlier video showing a different way that you can actually import. You can create your own Python script that you can import from another file and use those functions similarly to how we're using Streamlit just now. So here I'm going to just call my main function. And this is going to make sure that this is going to be here so we can initiate our function call here. So now that we have this section here, and we also define our main, now we can go right back up to the instructions here and start with our simple code. So first things first. If we want to really write a nice quick application, we are actually going to have access to creating a page title. So how we create a page title in Streamlit, we're going to use st, our shorthand. You'll notice here we have access to all these different functions that are available to us, but we only want the title at the present. So we're going to do st.title. And inside of this title, we're going to say Streamlit widgets example. And this title is just going to be bigger text that shows up on your application at the very top. So this is just going to, and I'll put it, it's going to set the page title. Now, the next item that we're actually going to do is we're going to, instead of displaying a large bold title at the top of our Streamlit app, we want to just be able to have input from the user. We want them to have a text input. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create a text input widget. So if you remember with Python, we used to have input and whatever we prompted out to the user and it will come out in the console. We would make sure that we had some variable on the other end to hold that return value. Using Streamlit, though, we can just do st dot, and there is a way that they've created a whole dialog box thing behind the scenes that will create that interactivity of allowing the user to input their data on your actual browser app here. And what that is it's called text underscore input. So in this section here, similarly with input, with Python, we have to prompt the user to do something. But before we do that, Streamlit has a really nice functionality where we can actually have a label which will show above the box. And this is the first parameter. And then the second parameter here, we actually have where we're actually going to have the user enter their name. And the second part here is just the placeholder text inside of the box. The user is going to input inside of there and stored inside of the variable. But since this returns a value, we need to make sure on the left-hand side of this, we are assigning it to a variable called name. So we can use that value whenever we want later on. So now that we've done that, the next thing we're going to do is display a greeting message here. So we're going to say if name, and that if name is saying if, there is a name stored inside of the name variable. So if the user did enter in a name, we're going to execute whatever code is inside of this if block here. So now what we're going to do to display a greeting message is we're just going to use st dot, and they have a write function. So this might look similarly to when we wrote when we were using file input output, but Streamlit has their own write built-in function. So inside of this, though, we're going to use our f string. We're going to write in a formatted way, and so we're going to have f in front of the quotes, and we're just going to say welcome, open, close, curly braces, and we're going to place inside of here the name that the user entered in, and we're going to have an exclamation point at the end of that. So now it's going to say welcome, whatever the user's name was, exclamation point, if they entered in a name. Now that we have this section here, we're going to move on to the next thing that we want the user to enter in. And this is going to be display selected color. Now, in this section here, or not display selected color, we need them to select the color. So we're going to create a select box widget here. And so we're going to use their built-in select box. So first things first, we're going to do st.selectbox, open, close parentheses. And this is a part of their interactive widget. It creates a drop-down menu with a label if we place it in there. And in this case, I'm just going to place this as pick a color as the first part of that with the label. And then in the second parameter, I'm just going to create a list. So you notice here, we're going to use a list, and hopefully you all remember what a list is. And I'm going to put first red as the first item, then I'm going to have blue as the second item, then green as the third item. And I think we're good for now. We have a list of 3 items as the second parameter. We have our label as the first parameter. Now, for the third parameter, we can actually set a default value that will be selected. So in that case, we can actually say index equals 0. So when we see it, what will happen is red will be the default value selected. But in all of this, because we're interacting, right, it's going to return some value, and we want to be able to use that value. So on the left side of the st.select, we're going to create a variable called color, and whatever the user selects is going to get stored in that variable called color. All right, so now let's see if, everything is working well. Let's go ahead and display the selected color. All right, so we have if color in the same way we had if name. If the user typed in a color, if there's some color inside of the color variable here, we're going to do st.write, open close parentheses, and we're going to have it also be formatted. And I like to have my placeholder there. And we're going to say you selected colon, and we're going to place our variable inside of that open close curly braces there to indicate that that is where we want the value to be. This is the placeholder area. So if the color exists there, if it turns true there, we're going to write you selected that specific color. And Streamlit will display that message confirming their choice. So now what we're going to do is we want to save our code here. This is all that was asked for you guys to do for that specific lab in Canvas, just to check to make sure your Streamlit items were working. I did have the in-person students use title as well as caption and also text input. So here we're going to go ahead and run this, but we're not going to run it like how we've done with Python here. We're going to run it in a different way. So we're going to click on, let me see if I can, let me minimize, touch it. All right, we're going to click on these 3 dots at the top, and we're going to click on terminal, and we're going to make sure that we open our terminal here. And we can actually use the old terminal that we have right here. So on the right, you'll have different types of terminals. You'll see here that your venv is already activated here because we didn't type deactivated. So you can do this, but since we've already moved into module 10 for the first one, we're going to use this first PowerShell here. If you don't care, if you already have your files in CS120 portfolio and you didn't have that first, that's how you create a new module. But I'm going to close that one and use the first one that I have here. Now that I have this here, how we run this specific file, it's not going to be how we run Streamlit Hello. Because they deployed that, we can use Streamlit Hello. What we're going to do is Streamlit, and we're going to say run. Oops. And we're going to have the name of the actual file that you want to run. So I'm going to do lab07.py. That's the file that I want to run. So I'm going to click on enter. And I know it gets super excited and moves on really fast, but you'll see here these 2 items pop up for you. The local host and the network host that you're sharing on, this is your port here, 85001. And this is if you, for example, want to remove it from, I know that there was at least 2 items or 2 individuals that had a bit of an issue with it even showing up. It was Mac users. You're going to copy this and use potentially Firefox or a different browser instead, and then you may be able to see it if that was the issue. But it should automatically populate your web app here. And now you see we have name, which is the label, and then we have a default value that gets in here. And I'm going to just type in Delhi and press enter there. Once you press enter, you'll notice right here that it says welcome person's name. And then we also see here that the default value that was selected is red, but if we want to change it, we can click on that drop down and change it to blue, and then it shows us we selected blue. We can change it to green, select green and red. So that is the first item that we have here. And then there's also aspects of Streamlit that you can modify as well. So you can go to settings and you can change the output or the way it looks. You can make it wider. As you've seen it shifted a bit. You can even choose, instead of using system, you can change it to light if you prefer it to be brighter. You could also change it to dark if you prefer it darker, or just using whatever the system setting you have on your computer is. You can even have run on save, so it will automatically update the app whenever any code is updated behind the scenes, or whenever, for example, I make any changes. So, for example, let me go ahead and just add a title really quickly inside, or a caption really quickly inside of here, which is more of like a subtitle. st.caption. And we're just going to say this is a subtitle here. And we're going to save it. And then you'll see when we open this up, you'll see rerun here that's attached here. This is also another option where it will rerun it, and you'll see the subtitle is attached there. So if you prefer to actually just have it save it without you having to click on rerun, you just run on save. And then that should update it automatically. So this is for Lab 7, currently for fall 2025. If it's labeled a different assignment name, just change it to whatever name it's in Canvas. But I hope this video helped you. And the next section of this video, I'm just going to show you how to upload it into Canvas, since a few people have had trouble understanding how to do that. So here, what you'll do on this side, since you've created your CS120 portfolio wherever you saved it on your computer, which is something that you need to know, you're going to just right-click on that, and you'll click Copy Path. And then if you don't know where it is, you can just see where it's located on your computer, and you paste the path, and it will show you where it is. Each of these forward slashes is showing you the next level of where it's at. Your root is just the user section here. So in this case here, what you're going to do is you can actually drag the file into Canvas from this location, and it will take that. You can copy the path, and then you'll be able to upload it. So I'll show you that here. Go to Lab 7. We'll do new attempt. And in this case, like I said, you can drag the file. Oh, I need to open up the folder thing. Okay, I'm gonna plop this in here. Oops. And here, this is the drag. Okay, move this over. Wrong thing. All right, so we can drag it in here, and for those of you on Mac, it would be in your Finder or wherever it is on your computer. That works, and it's uploaded right there. Or you can just click on here. For window users, let me move this down, and you can copy the path here, and then you click on Lab 7 and this out of the way, open, and then that's how you would upload the file into Canvas, and you click on submit. And then you have submitted and everything should be right. It tells you the time and the date that you've submitted it and what occurs there. And then obviously all of these instructions are just what we kind of already just went through. And that's all you are required to do. Inside of Streamlit, again, you click on that. I've created an HTML page that you can always reference that shows you how to do either of these. Um, and then you also can click on the API reference as well, and it will take you to all of the different Streamlit sections that you can play around with. You do not have to know it in detail. Literally, it will show you the instructions when you click on it of how to use it. It tells you what is inside of it, default values, different ways that it can be used, and shows you what it looks like. So it's pretty simple structure. You just need to actually take the time to understand it and look through it and not just, bypass some of these things. But we will go through all the items that you could use with Streamlit, and I hope that this video helped you understand that. Have a good rest of your day, and look out for class activity 13 or the next activity or assignment in the ranks.